called the TrueDepth. And the TrueDepth sensor uses infrared light and shines it on your face to see, are you the person you say you are? It turns out that TrueDepth sensor gives me as a developer quite a lot of information. I realized who would be interested in this data, who would this data be useful for? And I thought back to a campaign which has been plastered on the side of ambulances for years now of FAST, which is face, arms, speech, telephone, and it's a stroke campaign. Because the earliest signs of strokes are weakness in the face. And so I thought, okay, well, this massive campaign is all about facial movement. I can pick that up using just a phone. And so I thought, could that be useful for stroke rehab?
Welcome back, everyone, to the latest edition of the Sonin Podcast. We are here once again in front of the wonderful orange wall, which can mean only one thing. I'm pleased today to be joined by our special guest, Mr. James Coleman, someone who I've now known for, I think we were saying 8, 9, 10 years, somewhere.
No, that's not 10. No, don't do that to me.
8, 9, single digit years.
It might be, you know.
So James was previously an iOS developer here at Sonin, and subsequently has gone on to run his own business, Facial Dynamics, which you're here to talk to us about today.
I am.
Fingers crossed. So before I say anything more about you, do you want to give us a quick intro before I complete it for you?
Yeah, sure. So yes, I've been an iOS developer for about 10 years now, and I've enjoyed working with a lot of emerging technologies, so augmented reality, and things like, making an iPhone do things that kind of no one else thinks of, rather than just make calls and, take data and send data. I like to automate it and kind of make life as efficient as we can now that we have this supercomputer in our pocket since 2007, and especially since 2017 with the introduction of the iPhone 10 kind of really started to kick off of actually this is a really powerful device, it can do so much. And yes, I've also liked to specialize with kind of medical technology. So over the years I've worked with things like remote patient monitoring, virtual wards, orthopedic surgical beds, neonatal ventilators. So I've now combined all of my talents and passions into Facial Dynamics.
Amazing. Brilliant. Well, that's a fantastic segue probably. To introduce Facial Dynamics a little bit, and for someone that is hearing about it for the first time, do you want to give us an overview of what it is and how it works?
Sure. So Facial Dynamics is, in a nutshell, the world's first remote monitoring system for facial movement. So anyone who's ever been to the dentist will know what it's like to have a filling or a tooth extraction and to have your mouth and jaw numbed, right? It's essential at the time because otherwise dentists tend to be uncomfortable. But after that, it's difficult to speak, it's difficult to eat and drink, it's difficult to even move your face to actually evoke emotions, right? You can't even smile correctly. And, when you try and drink, water might dribble out your mouth, and it's just a terrible time. And you won't go back to work afterwards. You take the whole afternoon off. You won't go out with friends. It's not like, you nip down the pub after going to the dentist. Now, if we take that and we imagine that that's for months or years instead of a few hours, that's what people living with facial palsy experience day to day. So if you survive a stroke or you have Bell's palsy or Parkinson's, facial palsy is a natural part of that. And what happens is you probably go to the GP, and the GP will then refer you to a speech and language therapist who will say, okay, the problem with your facial palsy is not the muscles. The muscles aren't weak. It's not that they've atrophied or anything. The problem is the control. The nerves and the brain are the bits that are getting confused. And so what we need to do is retrain them to control the correct bits. And so that retraining comes in the form of very repetitive exercises and movements, which are usually performed in front of a mirror because you actually need the feedback of making sure that you're doing the correct thing. The trouble is a lot of people living with facial palsy don't want to do that because it means looking in a mirror and being confronted with the very thing that they're upset by. They don't want to actually even see themselves in mirrors. And this is not just my own opinion, this is feedback from people living with facial palsy and also their clinicians. Their clinicians know that this is a thing. And as a result, compliance with facial retraining is very low. And the clinicians know this, and they, what else can you do? Well, what if you had a way of showing someone a representation of their face, but actually not showing them a mirror image, a kind of perfect likeness? That's where facial dynamics comes in. So we can show them an augmented reality mask over their face or in place of their face completely, which guides them to they have enough feedback to correctly do the movements, but not so much that they find the experience upsetting. And because we're doing this on an iPad or an iPhone, we can also record what they're doing and send that data back to the clinician. So the clinician knows full well, yes, they did do that movement. And there's the video of them doing it. So they have live feedback. And also we can, for the first time, we'll be able to objectively record data about the movement. So we can analyze that in an objective way rather than in a subjective video. So we'll be able to say, okay, this is how much someone was smiling on the left and right side, and kind of seeing how symmetrical they are. We can see if someone is moving certain parts of their face instead of something else. So for example, if you start closing your eyes when you smile, that's quite common. It's called synkinesis. It's common in nerve regrowth. We can now actually see that happening remotely and have things like automatic alerts to say that this is developing and this is starting to happen. And it's very exciting.
Amazing. It is a fantastic product, and incredibly exciting. In terms of where it's being used right now, how's it going, and what feedback are you getting from people?
So for the past few years, we've been working with Walsall NHS with a department there called Stafford ESD, which is a kind of early supported stroke discharge. And they've been testing out a tech demo for us. So they're part of the NHS, and they've been kind of giving us feedback on the bits that they like and the bits that they don't. And in general, I've been kind of talking with clinicians, not just in the UK, but in Europe as well, and getting feedback on exactly what would be, the leanest, most efficient, some people would say MVP, product that would be useful to people.
Yeah. And feedback so far is looking pretty positive.
Everyone that you show it to kind of instantly kind of understands the purpose of it.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to sit there and discuss and explain to people why it's there, what it's for. Everyone kind of gets it, like, oh my God, you could see yourself or the patient remotely and they don't have to look at themselves. It's brilliant. And we get this data. Fantastic. Never seen anything like it before. And yeah, it's been a great project to work on.
Amazing. And so, everything starts from somewhere. Where did the idea for facial dynamics originally come from?
The original idea, I suppose, we could argue it started in this room, because way back in 2017, Apple released the iPhone 10 and we had a Face ID. For the first time, iPhones had previously been unlocked by just tapping in a passcode or holding your thumb over a fingerprint reader. For the first time, we had this sensor called the TrueDepth. And the TrueDepth sensor uses infrared light and shines it on your face to see, are you the person you say you are? And we use that to unlock the device, and it's still used today. And it turns out that TrueDepth sensor gives me, as a developer, quite a lot of information. Working with augmented reality and this technology, I realized who would be interested in this data? Who would this data be useful for? And I thought back to a campaign which has been plastered on the side of ambulances for years now, of FAST, which is face. No. Can't do that joke though. Which is face, arms, speech, telephone. And it's a stroke campaign, because the earliest signs of strokes are weakness in the face, weakness in the arms, slurred speech, and the T is for telephone. It's time to pick up the telephone. So, and dial 999 in case you're curious. And so I thought, okay, well, this massive campaign is all about facial movement, and I can pick that up using just a phone. We don't need some massive room with lights and cameras. This isn't like the Matrix or something. We could literally use the phone that people already have in their pocket. And so I thought, could that be useful for stroke rehab? And I thought about it kind of in the back of my mind over the years, and realized that this technology was gradually rolling out. It wasn't just the iPhone 10, this massive, expensive phone, flagship of Apple products. It was also dribbling down into other ones, and eventually it kind of became the absolute standard, And it was now starting to be in iPads as well. So all of a sudden, you've got this large user group with this technology in their pocket, and also it's accessible because, what Apple cleverly do is that their kind of older models, they still sell them brand new. So even if you don't have the money for the kind of flagship biggest one, you can still get a brand new one that's a couple of generations old, still got plenty of life left in it for much cheaper. So what we can then do is say, okay, let's try and make it. And that's basically what I did in kind of the evenings. I tried it out and got to a stage where I was able to actually show what the data was capable of detecting and the overall idea of the product to kind of a few friends in the industry. And the feedback was really positive, and I just kind of snowballed it from there. I'm lucky to live quite close to Queen Victoria Hospital in East Grinstead, which is the biggest facial palsy clinic in the UK. Showed it to a couple of folks there, and again, feedback just kept on rolling. And eventually, I managed to kind of get some seed funding so I could do it full time.
Yeah, amazing. See, all that time that we spent trying to get aeroplanes to take off from stacks of books through AR has come to quite a use in the end. And so, in terms of kind of when you first showed this to clinicians, you've talked about the fact that nothing like this exists, and this is kind of the stage before this is a mirror, essentially. So what was their initial reactions when you first kind of put this in front of clinicians?
Everyone got it straight away. It was really good, and they kind of realized that this is something that they would use. The biggest downside was the kind of nature of the data, because what happens is, we capture this data, but we don't really know what to do with it. Kind of the technology we don't understand what to do with it. But the clinicians don't either. So that's kind of a bit of a problem, but we're getting there.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so there's a certain amount of just kind of educating people on what's potentially possible now versus what was potential before as well.
Yes, exactly. So it's been a fantastic process. So everyone I show it to, 9 times out of 10, someone will say, you should speak to this person over here because they deal with something very similar. So it started all out with stroke because it's kind of the big obvious thing, and then led to Parkinson's as well, because again, it's kind of all about movement and especially about seeing the progression of change objectively. But there's so many other conditions where people have come to us and said, could we use it for dentistry? Yes, we could. Could we use it for ADHD diagnosis and kind of eye tracking? Yes, we could. Could we use it even for pain detection? There are systems out there already which use something similar to detect pain detection in people who can't emote that they are in pain. So there's all these different applications stemming from this kind of one use of just being able to see what the face is doing.
Amazing. Sprint. So just taking you back to one of the bits you were talking about earlier, you were talking about the issue with using a mirror being people seeing their own reflections and how, facial dynamics helps work around that. So can you talk to us a little bit more about why that matters so much in context of everything that you're doing, really?
Sure. So the compliance has been the number one thing. So with facial palsy, the only treatments are kind of extreme things like Botox, which is still done, but retraining is kind of the real long-term, most effective thing. And the problem is that you have to do it really quick. So kind of if you do it in the kind of the first 3 months after the onset of Bell's palsy, there's a good chance of kind of getting symmetry and freedom of movement back. But longer and longer you go without it, the lower the chances of kind of results is going to be. So early compliance is crucial. But of course, if anything, that's the hardest time for people to do the retraining because they're so upset at what's happened. This is a traumatic event that's happened, either a stroke or an infection, which kind of leads to Bell's palsy. And so it's a sudden onset, which then they have to live with. Getting the compliance up will hopefully improve recovery rates and then allow clinicians to simply see more people. We're working up in London with Guy's and St Thomas, and that's their simple goal is, can this software allow me to see more people because they will be recovering sooner and therefore I'll be able to see the people in the queue, basically.
Amazing. And so, obviously we talk a lot about building the right product here and making sure that it's aligned to both what the business wants to achieve and then also what the user wants to achieve. And therefore that drives usage and in this case, compliance that goes with it. A large part of how you'd normally go about that is through lots of conversations with users and lots of user testing. This is obviously quite a unique situation where user testing is somewhat trickier, right? So how have you gone about validating as you've gone through the journey when you don't have access to people that you can grab and interview in quite the same way?
It has been really tricky. So in my experience, I'm kind of used to this. That's helped, right? So my kind of medical world experience, it's a normal thing to not be able to kind of reach out and ask your end users. We're always going through third parties, so
Mm.
clinicians or usually clinicians. And so what we've had to do is reach out to people who we know live with facial palsy or have contacted us through the third parties. So going to charities and saying, please could I speak at your event? Or 9 times out of 10, actually, charities turn around to me and say, please could you speak at this event? Because we're really excited about what you're doing and we really think and you'll get a lot of success. And then folks coming up to me afterwards of their own accord and saying, I'd like to help out. And we've had that with, Stroke Association, Facial Palsy UK, different strokes. They've been fantastic with allowing me to go and kind of show what we've made and then get the feedback afterwards. And it is definitely something which I'm very passionate about, is ensuring that the product is accessible to everyone and also that it pleases everyone, because otherwise we'll never get the compliance. So there are, people who live with facial palsy out there who want things like real-time feedback and wanting kind of other features which the clinicians aren't so focused about, but I need to then convince the clinicians that this is something that your patients want, and I promise you this is going to help in the long run.
Mm.
So yeah, it's been just as tricky as any other medical device, to be pretty honest.
So in that environment, is there anything that you do differently or specifically to kind of mitigate the risk of building something that either wastes time and effort because it's not something that's going to hit the mark, or maybe doesn't take the product in the right way for the clinicians, for example, because you've got that slightly dislocated audience?
Sure. So one thing I did early on was build a tech demo, which we know, for example, took up to staff at ESD. And into that, I just kind of poured everything,
Mm.
all the ideas that cropped up, pour it into there, quick and nasty, and then just show it to people and say, oh, by the way, we've got this idea. How about this? And it's actually interesting how now in the real facial dynamics, people are asking us about, could you do this? And we've already tried that in the tech demo, which is fantastic. So we can just say, oh, bear with me one moment, bring up the tech demo and show them, and we can test out things which work well or, sounds good in theory, but then the practice is a little bit clunky. And, ideas for engagement, which we have, like karaoke, which I'm still a big fan of. But actually the clinicians kind of don't see the point, they don't get it.
They probably heard you singing.
That's true. So that's kind of really been kind of the key thing, is just trying things. The best prototype is the one that exists, is kind of as simple as that. And just try something and then use that feedback to make something which is truly worthwhile, which is hopefully what we've done with facial dynamics.
Absolutely, absolutely amazing. So, I guess the next obvious question is then we are where we are now, but looking forward into the future, what does the long-term vision look like?
The long-term goal of facial dynamics has always been diagnosis. Like, it's always been there as the big challenge, the big, hard, audacious goal, I think some people call it. And so what that would be is an electronic automated system of scanning someone's face and actually evaluating. It looks like you've had this kind of stroke this long ago. If you did these movements, this is the amount of recovery you could expect in 1 month, 3 months, 12 months, whatever. That's the ultimate goal. We've actually had interest from UCLH up in London, University College London Hospitals, of could you put this in the back of ambulances, because ambulatory triage is something that's already done. So if you're an ambulance and you get called out to a suspected stroke, you'll have a video call with an iPad to a clinician back at A&E, and that clinician will be a stroke expert, and they'll say, yes, I believe this is a stroke, and they'll have already in their head a kind of idea of what kind of stroke. Okay, we need a little bit of thrombolysis or whatever, and then get the team ready. Or that's not a stroke. It looks like a stroke, but it's not a stroke. Take them somewhere else, because we're a specialist hospital and we're not going to be the best case for them. You need to get them to this hospital because they're nearer, whatever. That's a nationwide program, and UCLH wants to use facial dynamics in the back of the ambulances to actually see if we could automate that process. Because the downside is, if you're in an area with poor signal reception, you'll never get a video call signal. And if you don't have the clinician back at the hospital, and they're not available because they're just busy, then you just can't do the video calls. It all falls down. So ambulatory triage is something that clinicians know helps, but being able to do it locally would be a heck of a lot more. So the next stage for facial dynamics is definitely being a medical device and getting it in use in the NHS.
Amazing. In terms of the journey that you kind of been on so far, are there any top tips that you've got that you would give to somebody that's right back at the start, and any particularly unexpected things that you've come across?
I think just try something is kind of my big message to everyone is try something because you can. Because, if you're in that position of thinking, "Oh, could I do that?" You probably are. I guess challenges along the way, it's just finding the right people. It's the kind of tale as old as time, is that if you find the right person who just agrees with you, kind of simple as that, of like, yes, I think you've got the right idea, then hopefully you'll be set. But it's finding the people who kind of don't understand it, and there have been one or two of just people who just don't get it, and so of course that's no further. So you might do a lot of work to speak to them, and then it's kind of all down the drain or whatever. But just keep trying, and just keep finding out, and just have a broad range as possible, because eventually you'll just find the right person and speak to the right people and get passed on to the right person, and magic will happen.
And there's a certain amount of self-belief involved as well, right? Because, I mean, we sat in Starbucks a number of years ago, right back at the start when you were kind of looking at the very first version of it. And you obviously persevered and carried on through there. So what's that piece like, that initial bit where you've got an idea, but you're not really sure if you've got an application and it's going to take? How do you carry on through that?
Yeah, I guess I think going on from that, Starbucks conversation, it was a case of getting a clinician involved, finding someone. In particular, it's actually a lot easier to get universities involved, because I don't know if I don't want to say they have more time on their hands, but they typically they're used to research, and they're used to seeing maybe student projects where it's not clean and shiny and all the rest of it. They're used to things which are a little bit dirtier. So my early work was actually directed mostly at universities. So there's, plenty of people all over the country who, still specialize in stroke or facial palsy, and they're still involved with the project to this day. I'll hopefully be speaking to some of them, very soon again. And so then that makes it easier, and again, there's the people at the universities, they've been in the industry a long time. So again, they're fairly well known and fairly well respected. And so if you could say to someone, "Oh, I've shown it to this person at this university, they really liked it," hopefully gets you in the door a bit easier.
And I guess one of the big questions, I mean, it's an amazing application, and obviously we've talked about the impact that it's hopefully going to have on everybody's lives as well. From your personal point of view, what's been the most rewarding part of building this so far?
It's really nice to be in charge. It's really nice. It's so nice to just not have a project managers or engineering managers or anything like that telling you what to do. There's not yet anyway, there's no product feedback to say, "Oh, this is rubbish, you need to change this." It's so rewarding just to have a clean slate. Any engineer will tell you the same thing, but to have a clean slate of just do what you want, fundamentally. And okay, it might not literally be to whatever I want. It's still obviously to a purpose, but to be kind of the designer and the engineer is just a kind of fantastic mindset to be in, of, yeah, let's do something which no one else has made, which is really useful and we can be proud of.
Amazing. I guess a follow on with that, as you suddenly move into the seat where you get to make the decisions rather than being told to do this on this timeline, how do you manage to maintain the discipline and know how far is far enough with different features, different ideas, different concepts?
I suppose, staying true to myself and, true to my roots or whatever, of like, I've always done it that way. And that's the reason why facial dynamics is the way it is. So if we keep on doing that, of, yeah, try out something quick, show it to some folks. If it works, great, integrate it. And if you can make it in a way that everyone understands it, then that's hopefully good enough. And just, yeah, I think, yeah, staying true to roots, as it were, is kind of the best way to go.
Amazing. Brilliant. Big piece of that. That's the lot. No more grilling. Thank you very much for coming on. Thank you for talking through facial dynamics with us and how you got here and the whole journey. I think we've covered quite a lot in there. We've talked about some of the challenges around getting user feedback in a kind of a medical environment. We've talked about prioritization, testing, feedback loops. We've talked about the importance of understanding the user and the context they're in from an emotional point of view, in terms of driving usage or compliance. Talked about different routes to market and the challenges inside there. And obviously we've talked about hopefully the future for you guys as well. Is there anything else that I've missed out there? And any last closing remarks?
Engineers can do it. Like you might be sitting there thinking, I'm going to be just someone else's lackey for life. But you're not.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Thoroughly appreciated it. It's great working with you as well. Being on both sides of the table, both having you as part of the team and working with you as a client as well. Very excited to see where it goes in the future, and thank you very much again.
Thank you.